can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get right to it. So I have one for you today, and I hope that you guys appreciate this as much as I do, especially in terms of who we're going to talk about. Captain Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, General Tiani of Niger, and Colonel Assimi Goïta of Mali, the three military leaders behind the alliance of the Sahel states, the AES, who are doing great things in the Sahel. And look, if it was a competition between other African nations, they would be winners hands down, okay? But it's not about that, all right? So let me give you just a little bit of the shared story between these three, all right? All three took power in coups. Mali in 2020-21, Niger in 2023, Burkina Faso in 2022. Okay, so there was Mali first, Burkina Faso, then Niger. All right, after years of jihadist violence that French-backed forces failed to stop. Okay, now the French were there supposedly to stop these terrorist jihadists from, wreaking havoc, burning villages, taking the women, killing villagers, this sort of thing. That's the reason why they were there. The French military, come to find out, they had no interest in stopping that whatsoever. And in fact, what they did was they brought the military in under the guise that they were there to protect the people against these jihadists, right? When in reality, they also snuck in or brought in French corporations in terms of mining. They made a deal with the then president of those countries and agreed that if they would extract raw minerals and resources from those areas, export them out, get the money, and kick back a pittance. All right, that's what happened. Anyway, so yeah, after the years of violence, of jihadist violence that French-backed forces failed to stop, in 2024, they formally quit ECOWAS. That would be Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They left ECOWAS. That, that African organization, which they said quite plainly was for nothing. Was for nothing, and they broke decisively from the Western sphere of influence. So not only did they back up from ECOWAS, an African organization, but they also told the colonizers, French, UK, United States, and others, it was time for them to leave, right along with their military and their corporations, their NGOs, in some respects and aspects, also their ambassadors, their diplomats. All right. So anyway, they broke away from the Western sphere of influence, particularly their former colonial ruler, France. All right. In 2024, they formed the AES as a confederation explicitly built around national self-reliance and resistance to Western dominance, with harsh criticism of the IMF and World Bank as tools of control. Okay. So actually, they were threatened that if they would do this, go ahead and do this, that they would be in debt of huge amounts of loans and paybacks. Not only that, but they would not be financed. IMF, World Bank would not finance the money, give the money for development, things of that nature. And let it be told today, that was music to their ears. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Anyway, so in 2026, Burkina Faso holds the AES presidency. So Ibrahim Traore is the president of the AES, is working on a shared stabilization fund and a regional investment bank. This is what they're doing in accomplishing. And Traore's foreign minister signed a large package of agreements with Russia in February of 2026, covering energy and counter disinformation, okay, on not needing loans from the West. Now, here's the thing. This was the goal specifically of these three countries, the AES. It was their stated goal as well as their shared goal, and it became a settled fact. All right, Traore's 2026 program, it pushes expanded irrigation, water storage, livestock feed production, aquaculture, and agro processing to anchor sovereignty. And there's genuine popular enthusiasm for this framing. Traore said the AES belongs to all Africans who desire sovereignty, independence, and total freedom. But the GDP per capita across the bloc remains low. At least this is what Western finance houses, firms, financial firms are saying, okay, that it remains low. French and Western troops are out, but have been replaced largely by Russia's AfriCorps, ex-Wagner, all right, rather than fully domestic capacity. And independent security assessments say jihadist territorial control and attack frequency have increased since the coups, with civilian casualties from both insurgents and military counteroffensive at record labels. Now, this is the West at work, France more importantly. So France is a proxy. They are trying to destabilize these three countries so that they can make their way back in. And not only that, but continue to pillage and extract these natural resources that they need to run, not just France, but other Western countries. Make no mistake about that. So they supply the jihadists not only with money and weapons, but also logistics in an attempt to do surprise attacks and things of that nature. To France's surprise, as well as the West, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have been very proficient in dealing with these jihadists. They have, in fact, knocked their numbers down significantly. A couple of months ago, there were reports that over 12,000 had formed somewhere in Ghana and were making preparations to enter into Mali, Niger, as well as Burkina Faso. And they entered into these countries and for a day or two wreaked havoc. In less than a week or so, those same insurgents, those same jihadists were begging for their lives. Now, couple that with the fact that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are also focused on continuing their build up of their infrastructure and their production in terms of manufacturing their own goods, producing their own fruits and vegetables and meat. Right, this is something that is being accomplished that cannot be denied by any Western media, let alone France. Now, in terms of France sponsoring terrorism, it's real and reoccurring accusation from the military government. And there is a habit of Western media outlets always referring to them as juntas, but they are precisely military governments. They are doing a great job at what they're doing. In fact, they're better than some leaders who call themselves that. All right. But anyway, Burkina Faso's government cut ties with France over accusations that it harbors blatant neo-colonial ambitions and provides active support for subversive networks and terrorists. Mali made similar claims to the United Nations Security Council in 2022, but provided no proof. And the French embassy denied the claim. Well, of course they would, calling it information manipulation meant to distract from the deteriorating security situation. Researchers note that claim isn't crazy on its face. There's historical precedent for great powers arming insurgents against governments they've lost influence over. And Sahelian interviewees argue French resents its force withdrawal from those three countries. But no hard evidence, intercepted funds, documents, etc., have been publicly verified. So treat it, you can treat this information as a contested political claim, not a confirmed fact. But again, you want to use everything you hear to your ability or to the point where you can discern what's truth and fact. Pay attention to not only what the Western media says, but also to the news that's coming out of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, as well as neighboring countries. Okay, but the bottom line is the sovereignty project between the three is real and popular domestically. The people love them for it. They're doing a great job. The mission is accomplished, or the mission accomplished version, self-sufficient economics or economies, defeated jihadists, proven French complicity, has started to show in terms of evidence and what's being gained and done with those or within those three countries. Okay. Yeah, the economic self-reliance is a stated goal, and it seems to be at this juncture and point an achieved one, and so the French terroristic link remains not just an allegation but a reality for those three AES countries. Now, that being said, I do have a clip. Give us a little more clarity and context. So before I do, please, as always, like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe. You are tapped in. This is the art of political discourse. Your involvement and your viewership means a great deal to us. So please share and like, as well as subscribe. We appreciate you very much. Let's get to this clip and let's run it. Let's run it. This is courtesy of the Sahel Informer.
President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, who now also chairs the AES Confederation, sat down with the defense ministers of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Not for a photo op, for year 2 of a roadmap that could reshape security in West Africa. Let's rewind first, because you need to understand what AES actually is. Less than a year ago, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger did something no colonial map, no old alliance ever expected. They walked away from ECOWAS. They walked away from decades of Western aligned security frameworks.
Because yes, Western aligned frameworks, that is the West, Europeans running most of, if not, but most of Africa. Well, one thing is for sure, those three states, including maybe Chad and a couple of others, are not under that heel or boot of the West. So this is a problem. It represents a problem, not just for France and the West, United States, UK, Germany, and others, but also for ECOWAS. ECOWAS is a puppet organization for the West, and they're being looked at by the West as not being capable of doing what they're told to do in curtailing and corralling the AES states.
And they built their own, the AES Unified Force. At launch, 5,000 troops, well-equipped, battle-tested, answering only to the Confederation. Today, that number has grown to 7,000. And the plan on the table right now is to triple it. Pause on that for a second. A brand new alliance, barely 3 years old, already fielding a joint force that can move across borders, strike in real time, and coordinate without asking permission from Brussels, Washington, or Abuja. The African Union took over 50 years to build joint defense frameworks that still mostly exist on paper. ECOWAS, the same story. AES did it in under 3 years. That's not an accident. That's a message. Here's where it gets interesting. This force isn't sitting in barracks. It's already active, right now, in the Liptako-Gouma region. The exact triangle where Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger meet. The most contested ground in the entire Sahel. And according to Malian President Assimi Goïta, this force won't stay confined to borders. It will conduct cross-border operations, meaning if a threat crosses from Mali into Niger, or Niger into Burkina Faso, this force follows it.
To ultimately achieve a truly unified and cohesive force, because when you carefully look at the comprehensive agenda of the Confederation, it becomes clear that Mali was specifically tasked with diligently working on the establishment and full implementation of this essential unified force.
No waiting, no negotiating jurisdiction. That is a level of military integration most regional blocs on Earth have never achieved. And 2 more countries, Togo and Chad, have already shown up to observe. Which raises a question every analyst in every foreign ministry is quietly asking right now. How far is this alliance about to grow?
I want to invite you to a free trading and investing workshop right here in Los Angeles that will...
So there was...
And that is a great question. How far is this alliance destined to grow? How far can it grow? How large can it become? Again, so we know Chad is coming in. Togo wants to come in. Togo is having a lot of inner strife, internal strife. That is, those who are puppets of France or the West are resisting independence and sovereignty to play puppet or lapdog for the West. There's also talk about Ghana and others, Senegal, others who want to become a part of the AES. And we think that in time, yes, it will expand. It will become bigger, larger, and it will take over the West. The Sahel will become, all of the Sahel will eventually become a part of the AES. And this is what a lot of us are looking forward to seeing take place.
Was then a comprehensive training phase with extensive tactical exercises meticulously held in Niamey, the capital city, as well as in various other significant Sahel states and regions. Togo and Chad also participated, so that was the beginning of the ramp-up phase. There was also the comprehensive training of essential staff officers, meticulously conducted by the esteemed Allo Blondimbe Medical School, located in Mali. Consequently, all these concerted and strategic actions collectively made it entirely possible to successfully build up a truly unified and cohesive force.
Now, this is what's stunning and also worrying the West, but in particular France. Should this thing be the success everyone is looking at it to become, France is rolled back in to the Sahel, especially those three countries, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. That goes down the drain. That will become an impossible task for France to accomplish unless they just declare all-out war, create some reason to go in there with their whole army and possibly other Western states backing them. But this is something that has stunned not just France again, but the West. They can't understand how this was accomplished in such a short period of time.
Therefore, we diligently established the fundamental and comprehensive standards for this newly formed unified force.
Now, the part that matters most, the human part. Inside that Ouagadougou meeting, Burkina Faso's Minister of War, Major General Celestin Simpore, said something striking. He told reporters this is no longer a simple counterterrorism campaign. It has evolved into what he called a protracted, high-intensity conflict. Read that again. These three nations are not preparing for a few more skirmishes. They are preparing for a long war, a grinding one. And that's the reality behind the headlines. Mali has faced recent terrorist attacks, communities shaken, families afraid. Major General Simpore addressed it directly, telling the public the situation remains under control across Mali and the wider confederation.
Alors, l'étape qui va suivre, c'est la montée en puissance. Cette force unifiée est le socle d'une véritable armée que nous sommes en train de bâtir au service de la Confédération de l'AES. Donc, nous allons continuer à renforcer nos capacités humaines, nos capacités matérielles et renforcer davantage les opérations que nous allons conduire sur le terrain. Parce qu'il faut que nous nous dotions d'un outil de défense considérable. Le monde a un tournant particulier et vous voyez que les crises sont perlantes et il est de l'intérêt des États de l'AES de mettre en commun une véritable force, une force pour laquelle les hommes seront dédiés au commandant de la force qui sera à mesure à tout moment d'intervenir n'importe où dans l'espace AES. Donc cette force devrait être à mesure d'être opérationnelle à tout moment, 24 heures sur 24. Donc nous allons nous atteler à faire ce travail avec en tout cas les instructions qui nous ont été données par nos responsables nationaux, les chefs d'État des pays de l'AES et surtout aussi les indications que nous venons de recevoir grâce à une audience qui nous a été accordée par le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, président du Faso, chef de l'État, président de la Confédération des États du Sahel.
But here's what he's really saying between the lines. We know this fight isn't ending soon, and we are done waiting for outside help that never fully came. For decades, the story of the Sahel was written by people outside the Sahel. Foreign troops, foreign mandates, foreign timelines. That story just changed. Now it's 3 presidents, 3 armies, one command structure, built by Africans for African sovereignty. And that is exactly why so many outside powers are rattled. Think about what a unified, cross-border, rapidly growing African force actually threatens. It threatens old security contracts. It threatens military bases that assumed permanence. It threatens the idea that African security has to run through foreign capitals.
And yeah, that is a great look for those 3, those 4, maybe 5, up to 6 African nations to, well, the 3 in particular, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, to have that force, to have constructed that force that is one army, not 3, but one army with one commander. It's a beautiful thing. I think that the shock is real in terms of how the West sees this playing out. You have a real army that seems organized, well equipped, and determined to accomplish its goal of sovereignty, independence, and free of terrorism, as well as terrorist-backed jihadists and or those who want to destabilize the country. So they're doing a great job over there. You have to acknowledge this. This is something that
Every time AES
that hasn't been seen in African nations, especially seen in Africa or African nations that does not have a European fingerprint on it, a European structure behind it or underneath it. This foundation was built by Africans and for Africans. They're carrying the weight, responsibility, and are fully accountable for its success, as well as its permanence in the region. It's a good look.
grows. Every time that force number climbs from 5,000 toward the triple target being discussed right now, the old order loses a little more leverage. That's not speculation. That's why Ouagadougou had defense ministers flying in. That's why the language coming out of this meeting was about legal documents, operational coordination, sustained preparation. This is not the language of a symbolic alliance. This is the language of an alliance preparing to last. And here's the part that should stop you mid-scroll. AES did in 3 years what ECOWAS couldn't do in over 5 decades.
And that's a beautiful thing. ECOWAS been in effect for a very, very long time. They have not brought anything of substance or anything tangible, anything worthwhile to the people or those countries who are part of ECOWAS. You see still conflict, you see corruption, you see greed, you see terrorism, and you see this playing out for the most part by or through interlopers or people who are involved in matters that don't involve them. So that's what's being said is France and the West continue to manipulate situations and circumstances in Africa, especially those countries that are part of ECOWAS. There seems to be a continuing instability in those countries that continue to partner and rub elbows with France, United States, Germany, Italy, UK, places like that. They continue to have issues and problems. So it would be no wonder that, or if countries who are aligned with ECOWAS are sitting back and looking at the AES and saying, damn, they're only 3 years into this, 2 years into this, and look at their progress. Something's not right over here. We're leaving, you would think that would be the case. And it has been the case. Countries have inquired as to whether or not countries who are part of ECOWAS have inquired as to whether or not joining the AES is something that they will be allowed to do. All right. Now, you got to take this not necessarily with a grain of salt, but you take it with confidence that Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, maybe Togo, maybe Senegal, maybe Ghana, there's really no real clarity on who the AES is going to allow in next. But you have to take it into consideration that this is something that is inspiring to not just that region, but the whole of Africa, right? Other African countries as much as and or as well as the youth, the people in these countries are clamoring, screaming for change. They want to see that their country that is full of resources and wealth comes back to them and allows them to live a more better, decent life than what they're living under the direction and colonization of European nations. All right. Tell us what you think. Do you think Ibrahim Traore, Tiani, as well as Goita will pull this off, or will they receive some type of flack, blow back, and or destabilization from Western countries, particularly France and the United States, in the hopes of derailing any progress or continued progress for these countries who are call themselves the AES? Let us know what you think about this. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but